Multiple people have now told me that my recipes are far too complicated and that they're very intimidating for people to approach, which is fair. So here is this orange ginger loaf cake, which is arguably the most basic form of a cake. And the process of making this is equally as straightforward, as there's very little room for error in this recipe. It gives you the most perfect textures and flavors pretty much every time, and it can easily be elevated with some simple garnishes, but definitely does not feel incomplete without them. And hopefully this can be a recipe that you feel confident to try out yourself. To get started with the cake batter, I have my orange, which I have washed thoroughly, and we're gonna zest the entire thing. Make sure not to go too deep into the rind, or the whiter parts are gonna taste bitter in the cake. Then we shall juice the orange. I'm gonna stab it with a fork. Stabbing your orange helps break up the pulp, which means you're gonna get the juice a lot more easily. If you have a pretty big orange like mine, chances are you're not gonna need the juice of the entire thing, so just measure out the amount that the recipe calls for. Then for the ginger aspect of the cake, I'm using some fresh organic ginger. You want to use fresh ginger because that's what's going to give it the most flavorful and fragrant result in the cake. I'm peeling the ginger with a spoon. This just leads to the least amount of food waste because you can get in between those little nubs and grooves that a vegetable peeler and a knife usually won't be able to reach. Now to grate the ginger, there is a trick to this that makes the whole process so much easier. If you just grate the ginger in whichever direction, or specifically against the grain of the fibers, you're probably just going to end up with more ginger juice and some leftover fibers. You want to find the direction in which the fibers are going in and grate along it, and this is what's actually going to help you break up the ginger into small bits so that it's more evenly distributed throughout the cake. With the orange and ginger prepared, we're going to finish mixing together all of our wet ingredients. I'm adding in my Greek yogurt. You can also use sour cream, and then crack in your 2 eggs. And this is best if the eggs are at room temperature. It just incorporates into the rest of the batter a little bit better. And just mix until smooth. Great. Now we do the stand mixer. Now for the rest of the batter, I'm going to be using the reverse creaming method, which is where you incorporate the butter into the dry ingredients and then mix with the wet ingredients. So to my stand mixer bowl, I'm adding in my all-purpose flour, cornstarch, baking soda, baking powder, salt, and white granulated sugar. Let that mix a little bit until it's incorporated. And then add in your softened unsalted butter. Let this mix on medium-low speed until the butter has been distributed throughout the flour and it forms this sandy and crumbly texture. Make sure you don't overmix this though, because it's going to be really tough to incorporate the wet ingredients and allow this to form a batter. Once you add the wet ingredients, turn this to medium-high speed and let this mix. It's going to come together super quickly, and as soon as there are no dry bits left, pause the mixer, scrape the sides and the bottom. Don't worry if the batter looks a little bit separated or kind of grainy at this point, because we're going to let this burst on high speed for 10 to 15 seconds until the batter becomes fairly smooth, almost paler in color, and looks like a regular cake batter. For the cake pan, I'm using the same one from my lemon Earl Grey loaf cake video, which a lot of you guys asked about, so here are the dimensions, and you can find the link to getting this exact one in the description below. This isn't a non-stick cake pan, so be sure to take the necessary precautions to prevent your cake from sticking to it after it's baked. I like to grease it. You can also use parchment paper. And once you've transferred all the batter into the pan, be sure to smooth out the top a little bit to help the loaf rise more evenly. Tap the cake on the counter to pop any big air bubbles, and into your preheated oven this goes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius for 45 minutes. The best part about a loaf cake is in its simplicity, and so it doesn't require any sort of fancy decoration. We're gonna go for a very simple glaze. This is a ginger glaze. I have some more freshly grated ginger that I'm just gonna mix with my icing sugar and add enough water until it reaches the consistency you like. I'm gonna keep it a little bit thinner since I want to brush it onto the cake, but if you want to go for a drizzle, you want to add a little less water so it stays a bit thicker. Once the cake is baked, be sure to do the toothpick test to ensure that it is fully cooked, and then I like to let it cool inside of the cake pan for roughly 5 minutes before running the sides with a butter knife and then flipping it onto a cooling rack. And then we can brush on the ginger glaze even while the loaf is still warm, since this isn't a frosting and there's no risk of it melting due to the heat. And I know I said that you don't have to decorate this because you don't, but I, however, threw on some orange slices, orange peel, and mint leaves because look how much it elevates it. Believe me, this is me keeping it simple. And I think it is a pretty beginner-friendly way to spice up a cake, so feel free to give it a try. But that's it with this loaf cake. I think this is best eaten either at room temperature or slightly warm, since the butter in the cake will harden a bit after refrigerating. And be sure to let me know if you want to see more loaf cake recipes. Thanks so much for watching.